Hi, this is Matt Baker, and today I'm going to show you how I am related to another famous YouTuber you might know, Mr. Beat. Recently, the YouTube channel Geneavlogger has been doing videos on YouTuber family trees. Last year, he covered Sam Aronow as well as Mr. Beat, and currently he's doing me. In doing the research for these videos, he discovered something interesting. Mr. Beat and I are 11th cousins, so today I'm going to show you a bit of Mr. Beat's family tree, as well as a bit of my family tree. And I'm also going to show you exactly how our two trees connect. But first, I want to introduce you to our sponsor, MyHeritage, because you might be wondering how you can research your own family tree. Well, MyHeritage makes it very easy. You can sign up now for a 14-day free trial, and if you decide to keep it, you'll get 50% off. So long as you know the names of your parents and grandparents, MyHeritage does the rest. Once you enter that information, the website will automatically add discovery links, which you can click on to get suggestions on how to grow your tree. MyHeritage is able to do this by comparing the names on your tree to the names on other people's trees, as well as to the 15+ billion records that it gives you access to. It also has lots of great tools. It allows you to print your tree in a bunch of cool formats, and it can even animate your old photos. So why wait? Sign up for your free trial right now by using the link in the description or pinned comment. Who knows? Maybe you'll discover that you too are related to Mr. Beat and I. Okay, so first of all, let me introduce you to Mr. Beat's family tree and show you some of the cool things that the Geneavlogger discovered when researching it. I'll start with his paternal line. For the sake of privacy, I've left off the names of any living people other than Mr. Beat and I. But here you can see Mr. Beat's grandfather, John Beat, who passed away in 2015. He's shown in a military uniform, and this is because he served in the Korean War. He was the son of Gertrude Struble and William Beat. This couple lived in Kansas, which is where the Beat family still lives to this day. However, William Beat's father, Henry Beat, was originally from Ohio. And if we go back just one more generation, we discover that the Beat family actually originated much farther away. You'll notice that Mr. Beat's great-great-great-grandfather spelt his name a bit differently. This is because he was born in France, near the border with Germany. John Beat immigrated to the United States in the 1850s, which was when over 1 million people came from Germany and settled in the American Midwest. As was the case with many new immigrants to North America in those days, John Beat changed the spelling of his surname to something more English sounding. So Beat became Beat. Now, if you're familiar with Mr. Beat's channel, you'll know that he focuses a lot on US history. And in particular, he knows a lot about the various US presidents. In fact, he's made a song for every single US president from George Washington to Donald Trump. Therefore, when the Geneavlogger was researching Mr. Beat's family tree, he paid close attention to how Mr. Beat might be related to some of his favorite presidents. And he discovered that he was in fact related to several of them. The US president that Mr. Beat is most closely related to is Dwight Eisenhower. Let me show you how. As I mentioned, Mr. Beat had a great-grandmother named Gertrude Struble. Well, the Strubles descend from a man named Peter Struble from Germany. And Peter Struble had a daughter named Maria who married a man named Hans Eisenhower. And together, they were the great-great-great-grandparents of US President Dwight Eisenhower. So that makes Mr. Beat President Eisenhower's 5th cousin 4 times removed, which is a fairly close relationship. Let's now look at Mr. Beat's maternal side. Mr. Beat's maternal grandmother, who is still living, is the daughter of Mabel Whitcomb. And it is the Whitcomb family that connects to both Mr. Beat and me. But before we look at that connection, let me first point out the Goldtrees. If we go up 3 generations from Mabel Whitcomb, we get an ancestor of Mr. Beat named Mary Goultree, daughter of Nathaniel Goultree. And if we go up 2 more generations from there, we come to a man named Oliver Goultree. Now, according to the Geneavlogger's research, Oliver Goultree owned a plot of land in New Jersey that was part of what's known as the Middlebrook Encampment. This encampment is where George Washington and his Continental Army were staying in 1777 during the height of the American Revolution. And it's also where the very first flag of the United States was unfurled and flown. So that's yet another interesting connection between Mr. Beat and U.S. history. But back to the Whitcombs. If we follow Mr. Beat's Whitcomb line, we find that it leads to an ancestor named Joseph Whitcomb, who was one of the earliest settlers in New England. He was not a Mayflower passenger, but he arrived in the colony of Massachusetts Bay, just north of Plymouth Rock, about 10 years later. Now here's the thing. Joseph Whitcomb is also one of my ancestors. Mr. Beat descends from him via his son Job, whereas I descend from him via his son Josiah. Josiah Whitcomb had a grandson named David, who married Betty White. No, not that Betty White. And they had a daughter named Eunice. She married a man named Timothy Houghton, and together they moved up to Nova Scotia, where Timothy became the founder of the town of Chester, which is located near Tancook Island, which, if you watched the previous video I made about my family tree, you'll know is the location where most of my ancestors came from. Note that 3 generations down from Eunice Whitcomb, the Whitcomb name was still being used by my ancestors, in this case as a middle name, which seems to indicate that they knew that the Whitcombs were a very old and important family. If we go 2 more generations down, we come to Emma Cross, who married Gabriel Baker. They were the parents of Arnold Baker, my paternal grandfather. So because Mr. Beat and I both descend from Joseph Whitcomb, that makes us 11th cousins. Now, as I mentioned, Mr. Beat is also related to several US presidents. Well, so am I. The closest being the 2 Bushes. Remember that Betty White I pointed out earlier? Well, she was the great-great-grandchild of John Prescott, another early settler of New England. Another one of John Prescott's great-great-grandchildren was Samuel Prescott, one of the patriots who rode with Paul Revere during the American Revolution. Interestingly, my 2 sons descend on their mother's side from another one of the riders that night, William Dawes. Anyway, Samuel had a sister named Lucy, who in turn had a great-great-granddaughter who married a man named James Bush. Their grandson, Prescott Bush, became a U.S. Senator. Note that his parents chose to name him Prescott to mark their connection to the famous Prescott family from early U.S. history. Of course, even more important than Senator Prescott Bush was his son and grandson, who both served as U.S. presidents. Okay, so that's how Mr. Beat and I are related to each other, and also to some U.S. presidents. But what about royalty? A few years ago on this channel, I made a video where I explained how most people of European descent can somehow connect back to European royalty. So what about Mr. Beat and I? Do we carry any blue blood? Well, yes we do. And let me show you how. Let's go back to Joseph Whitcomb. Now, when you're working this far back, you have to realize that records can be quite shaky, and you can't always believe everything you see online. When you're using a genealogical website, such as Genie.com, you're relying on other people's research, and often people make assumptions without checking the paper trail to confirm everything. So you've got to be careful and understand that most things this far back are tentative at best. Joseph Whitcomb is a good example because I've seen at least 2 different people listed as his father. But in either case, he almost certainly was a fairly recent descendant of an Englishman named Thomas Whitcomb. and Thomas Whitcomb was very likely the great-great-grandson of a man named Sir John Cornwall, who served as a member of Parliament in England. If we follow the Cornwall line, we discover where the Cornwall surname comes from. It comes from Richard of Cornwall, who was an illegitimate son of Prince Richard, the Earl of Cornwall. Prince Richard was the son of King John of England, and in fact, Richard was also elected by several German nobles to serve as the Holy Roman Emperor, although he was never crowned. Now again, let me remind you that none of what I've shown you in this video is actually all that incredible. Most people with at least one English ancestor can trace a line back to King John, and most people in North America whose families have been here for a while probably have at least one ancestor from the very early days of European settlement. Therefore, most people in North America are related to most other people in North America one way or another. And that means that most Americans are probably related to their presidents. This even includes people of African American descent, as I pointed out in my video on the Berry-Gordy family. So the amazing thing is not the fact that one person is related to another person. The amazing thing is figuring out exactly how. And that involves doing some research into your own family tree, which is why I encourage you to sign up for MyHeritage using their 14-day free trial. Again, you can find a link to that in the description or pinned comment. In the description, you can also find the links to the videos by the Geneavlogger, which go into much more detail on both Mr. Beat's family tree as well as mine. I encourage you to check them out. Thanks for watching.